Ladies and gentlemen, I have had a most fortunate life. I have the love of God, the love of a beautiful woman with our children, and I was in a terrific job. And I regularly got into trouble because I confused the order. Like so many men here, I was regularly told, if you can take your bloody bed down to the fire station. As Terry talked, we came, we're a big family, we're the biggest family in Upper Ferntree Gully, and I think we were probably the poorest. And we never realised that. We got 3 square meals a day and a bed each, and we lived a great life. And I feel sorry for the children of today because they don't have the freedom that we had then. And we roamed the hills, whether it was pouring rain or in baking sun, and we had a great enjoyment of life. I also remember Sister Rosaline so well when I went to school and in grade 4 for 2 reasons. The first was that she gave us a great enjoyment of learning. I'd come from the school of hard knocks, I suppose, where some of our teachers, I don't think should have been teachers, and they didn't have that innate ability to be able to encourage kids who in many cases came from a pretty rough background. And so I gained that great enjoyment of learning from her. Now there's a second important reason though that I remember her well. She was the first teacher who didn't belt me for being left-handed. You have to appreciate that at a Catholic school, where the Latin word sinister is the equivalent of the left. And here was this kid who refused to turn to the right. I have to say, sister, that after I'd had the stroke, I taught myself to print with my right hand. There you see, necessity is the mother of invention. It's a great pity that our cousin Peter Malloy is not here today. Peter is the son of Pat Malloy, a policeman at that time at Springvale. And in this year, Maury and my sister had gone to stay with the Malloys. Peter had come to stay with us. If my mother knew the half of what Terry, Peter and I got up to in that short time, she would have gone white overnight. But one of the things that Peter did say, one day the fire siren was going, which was of no great interest to us, and he said, we have to go to the fire station. And we said, why? He said, because we have to mind it until the firemen get back. So off we trotted down to the empty fire shed at Upper Gully, sat around, looked at the walls, and I have to tell you, it was nothing at all like this. And anyway, eventually the firemen came back and we all trotted off home. But we got into the habit, or certainly I did, got into the habit of this going to the fire station if the siren was going. Until one memorable day, Mr. Morris, as I knew him then, a lieutenant in the brigade, is standing out in the street, the siren's going, there is not a soul in sight. And he said, get on. And I had achieved my 7th heaven. In the old Austin, which Jack could do unbelievable things to, we went to a bushfire at Boronia Road, Boronia. That sets the time. And I worked away with Jack on the Austin, and from there on I was hooked. I was completely hooked. And so I would be at the station every time the siren went, and if they were short-handed or they took pity on me, I'd be on the truck. I saw some sights that really I should probably have been quite upset about because there were fatalities at fires, but it was all part of the learning experience until finally when I was 15, they sent me home to get Mum's permission to join the fire brigade. As Terry mentioned, I joined the staff of Country Fire Authority, and that was born from us being at a fire in the Dandenong, in the basin. You know, I think about 1960, when for the first time we met a man who we came to realise was the regional officer, and this was Maurice McLaren. And there was this man, and it was dark, the fire went right up the mountain, and he was in this Holden utility with aerials festooned all over it, and the trucks would come in, and men would get off the truck, and they would go and talk to this man, and then they'd get back on the truck, and away they'd go again. And it was only next morning when we met up with this Mr. McLaren, and I realised he was a regional officer. And that was to be my life's wish. That reinforced the need for me to get on and stay at night school and get a qualification, because my goal was to be a regional officer. And I was successful in that. For years, I was the Jonah of Country Fire Authority. Nobody wanted to see me, because everywhere I went, it was as a result of somebody having a coronary or some serious illness, and I would go in to relieve until such time as I came back or were given an easier job, and then I'd be sent off to do something else. And so in 1967, I'd been sent to Ballarat. Regional Officer Ken Chaplin had had a heart attack. One of the things you find as a young officer is that you arrive at the regional headquarters, and in those days they were mainly in the back of houses. So of course you not only had to pick up the job of running the region, but you had to comfort or show sympathy to the regional officer's wife, because she's got a husband in the hospital, desperately ill. She's getting all the phone calls and so forth that go on and running a region. And here's this young whippersnapper there who is supposed to hold the fort. To add to the burden at Ballarat, the officer who would normally have got the job, Bill McIntosh, was at Colac. And his wife, Annette, was about to have her second baby. And Bill had asked me would I go and stay with Annette. Well, I was terrified. I thought, if Annette goes into labour, how am I to A, get her to the hospital, or B, look after the older child who was only, 2, I suppose. So round I went to the assistant chief, and I gave him all these technical reasons why it would be far better if Bill was back at Ballarat and I went down to Colac. And nobody was more surprised than me when after 3 days, the chief officer of Arthur Petfield agreed, and off I went to Colac. And I met this young lass on the night of her 17th birthday, on the eve of her 17th birthday at the Colac Fire. The resident officer and his wife there said they had a spare bedroom and that I could board with them at Colac. And I was thinking this was for just one summer, of course, because Jack would be back on, the regional officer, Jack Clark, would be back on his feet. But in reality, the years went past. And of course, the rest is history. I fell in love with this beautiful woman, and we were married. And we had 4 children. And life was marvellous. And I reached a stage in my career where I decided that I'd contributed all I could to Country Fire Authority, or that I'd been there long enough for them to put up with me. And I'd become very involved and very interested in a thing called ICS and AIMS. Now, I realise there's not many here who know anything about AIMS, but I had been to North America following the major fires of 1983. And there I'd come across a thing called ICS. And an officer from the Los Angeles County Fire Department, he drew the whole structure of ICS on the back of an envelope. And I thought, this is for us. Now I do appreciate that what I knew as ICS on the back of an envelope is what you know as ICS today. But it was such a clear-cut, straightforward method of being able to manage a major operation that I now felt this was the thing for the country. As a result of that, I became one of the most hated people. I was banned from New South Wales. The Chief Commissioner of Police in New South Wales had issued a directive that this illegal type operation called AIMS was not to be used. Well, it's a shame Laurie Lavell's not here, because he and I went up to Mount Macedon to the Emergency Management Institute, I think it was called at that time. And our task, or my task, was to present a paper to the training managers of the state emergency services. And we get there and we had morning tea with them. Even me, who's a bit obtuse at the best of times, thought things were a bit icy. And Roger Jones was the director of the establishment in those days, and he came to us at the end of morning tea. He said, we've got a bit of a problem. He said, they won't listen to you. And he said, if you're prepared to stay on till lunch, I'm prepared to do some negotiations with their directors around the country to see if, in fact, we can resolve this problem. So we did, and drank umpteen cups of coffee at Emergency Management's expense, and had lunch, and even then lunch was pretty cold too. But anyway, and I presented my standard Simon Damsack that afternoon, and got the standard response of the fact that it didn't work. And my argument in all those years when this was happening was, if you've got something better, tell us about it. Because this is part of a journey. And all we want to do is to be able to have a method that is the very best possible. And I'm delighted to see in the years that passed, notwithstanding what happened in New South Wales, that AIMS has become the standard method of fire operations and in fact emergency operations generally. In the last 15 years, my life has changed. I'm now great friends with a cardiologist, a rheumatologist, an oncologist, a urologist, a bowel surgeon, a liver surgeon, and a vascular surgeon. I'm on first name terms with all of them. I pay them large sums of money periodically. In the last 15 years, I've suffered an aneurysm, angina, cancers of the bladder, bowel, lymph nodes, liver and lungs. I've had a heart attack. I've had osteoporosis, which resulted in fractures of the pelvis, the ribs, the collarbones, the shoulder, and stress fractures of the thighs and ankles. I've had a stroke. I've had duodenal and gastric ulcers, and I've had Wegener's granulomatosis. And I'm still here.